We were so blessed today. What we're going to do right away is we're going to invite Secretary Mike Pompeo to come up, and we're just going to have an intimate kind of Q&A for all of us here. I just thought he did a great job at the summit. For those of you who were there, did you think he did all right? We were so blessed all the way through, but I've got to tell you, when I say elections matter, they matter. Because without Donald Trump, and for a second, let's say we don't care what you think about Donald Trump, but without Trump, you do not have Mike Pompeo today. And that's a big deal. So a good leader brings with them a good team. And I'm just so thrilled that we have a Secretary of State like Mike Pompeo. Mike, would you come up and join me at the hot seat? And do we just have one mic? I'm just looking at audio.
I've got a lapel mic.
You have a lapel mic.
Yes, sir.
You're the Secretary of State. You know, Secretary Pompeo, when you spoke today, Darla said to me, boy, he seems like just a nice guy. You know, you got those Midwestern roots. It doesn't look like the Secretary of State's office has changed you. You don't look like you think you're all that stuff. What got you into politics? What got a really good person, successful person, you and Susan, to say, you know what, we're going to get into this field?
Yeah. Well, first of all, thanks for having me here tonight, and thanks for letting me be with you. I know that institutions like the Family Leader, when I think about how America will continue its work, continue its revival, push back against all the challenges that we're seeing on our streets today, it is civic institutions, it is prayerful people, it's groups like this who come together that I am confident will lead it. It's not likely to come from the top down. It is almost certain to come from the Lord and from people who gather as you all are doing here today. And that kind of gets to your question about what gave Susan and I. Of course, you have the earthly things. Our son had gotten a little bit older. There was an opportunity. The current congressman was running, so there was a little bit of space. I had friends urging me, saying you should be crazy enough to go do this. And then I've always had a piece of my life which recognized how much I'd been given by the Lord and how much America had given to me too. And there was a chance to go serve. And we were also at a time, this would have been when I entered politics for the first time, would have been 2009 when we committed. We'd had Obamacare, we'd had a bunch of things that I thought were fundamentally taking America in the wrong direction. And I saw the challenges it would present to the employees that worked for me at the company. And I concluded I might be able to go do a good turn. If I could be successful, if I could run a good campaign, I might be able to serve America just a little bit. And the Lord has blessed me and given me not only that opportunity for 6 years to represent 750,000 people in Kansas, but now the chance to serve in this privileged place working for Donald Trump to try and deliver foreign policy around America that keeps us all safe, keeps our young men and women in uniform out of harm's way, and delivers good outcomes for the American people. It's been quite a journey. Quite a journey. And since Susan kind of alluded to it, that you might be calculating. We're only kidding. You're not calculating. Yes.
God's opened up doors. God opened up a door to allow you to be a congressman. But what got you to the CIA and then from the CIA to the Secretary of State's office? I mean, what kind of doors are like, are you kidding me? That door open?
So, it's still, I tell this story. I had not met President Trump before the day that I went to Trump Tower. So I was reelected on a Tuesday in November. That following weekend, I was in Washington. I'd gone back. There was some work to do. I think it was that following week in Washington. I'd gone back, and I get a call. I get a call from Vice President Pence, who says, "Hey, Mike, if there was the right thing, might you be willing to join the administration?" And I didn't think a heck of a lot of it, but I said, of course. I'd known Mike. Susan had been in a Bible study with Karen Pence. He had served with me. His final term in Congress was my first term, so I knew him a little bit. And I said, sure, find the right thing. I didn't say anything to Susan, didn't think two thoughts about it. On Monday, he calls and says, what would you think of CIA director? And of course, you all know the correct response is, no, that's not nearly good enough, right? I, of course, said, yeah, no, I can absolutely. We'll find somebody good for that. And he said, no, we think maybe you ought to come up and talk to the president about it. And I said, I'd be honored to do it. So this was by Tuesday. I interviewed on Wednesday with the president, spent 2.5 hours with him. in his office talking about a range of things. He called me that night. I spoke to him for another several hours. It was just before that meeting that we actually told our son, because before that you think, oh goodness, they've got 15 candidates and I'm going to do this interview and hopefully help him be successful, but it won't be me. And then literally Thursday morning, I was sitting in my congressional office. I had a group of farmers in the office from Kansas, and I rudely had my phone sitting on my desk and saw it was a New York area code. Now, that's been a strange week. I'm going to take this call. So I excused myself, walked into this little closet in the back of a congressional office, and it was President-elect Trump, who said, would you like to be my CIA director? And I said, yes. And in classic President Trump fashion, he said, great, and hung up. So shortly thereafter, the team called, and on Friday morning, it was announced. The Lord was clearly at work. The work that I did for the Central Intelligence Agency was really important, a group of very unique people who serve us in difficult, dark places. I had the privilege of standing up a chaplains program at the CIA. I hadn't had one before. The military has chaplains. The CIA didn't have one, and so officers who were clandestine officers didn't have any place they could go, right? If they're having problems in their marriage or problems in their home life, what do you say? The first thing the psychiatrist would ask you is, what do you do for a living? And you have to say, I'm sorry, I can't tell you. And so I wanted to create that space where there would be religious-based assistance for our officers, and we built it out, and it has proven to be a really, really important program. I found some great former military chaplains who built it, and I'm really proud of what we did there.
So being the CIA director, was there ever a time when you came back and Susan was home and she goes, hey, how'd your day go? And you're like,
yeah, frequently. Frequently. It's very different than my job today. My job as Secretary of State is very public. You see me all on TV, and you see my travels, and you see me working with the president on important issues. The job of the CIA is wonderful in that it is clandestine, and you can travel, and nobody knows who the heck you are, and you can still do important work. But there were many days, not only did I come home and say, what the heck, but there were many days I was in my office saying, oh my goodness, isn't America great? The things we can do, the work we do that is important, trying to help people all across the world that we can do in quiet ways delivered by our intelligence community is truly powerful. And I wish that I could tell some of those stories, because you would all be so proud of what they do with the resources that you provide them and how the Lord oversees the efforts that the CIA makes as well.
And when President Trump became president-elect, he chose Rex Tillerson to be Secretary of State. And I thought what was kind of telling is when we went to Israel and we went to the embassy in Jerusalem, and they presented me a challenge coin for being there. I think it was on your recommendation, so thank you. It's a very cool coin. Somebody said I could get a lot for it on eBay. But anyhow, but on the cornerstone, they have President Trump, and they have Vice President Pence, but they don't have Secretary of State Tillerson with that embassy being in Jerusalem. And that's not real typical, is it? Where usually the Secretary of State would be with the president on that cornerstone as well?
Yeah, I think that's right. I don't know the story behind that. It's this enormous duty that you have, right? I have embassies all across the world.
You bet.
We've created not only that really special place there in Israel, but half a dozen others. And each time I see the stone or the cornerstone there, and it's got my name, I know that it'll be there for an awfully long time. And I hope that America will be in those places, delivering the American message, delivering a central understanding about our country as a Judeo-Christian nation. And if we can do that and do that well, that's
well, thank you for your leadership in recognizing Israel that way. We all appreciate that. So how did the Secretary of State door open up for you?
About the same. At this time, I knew the president. He called and said, hey, you need to come see me. I came down to the office and said, how'd you like to change jobs? And of course, that could go either way. And we had a conversation about it, and I told him, of course, if he wanted me to serve in that role, I'd be honored to do it. And it was a couple weeks later that he made the decision to make that transition. Now,
yesterday you made a major speech and on unalienable rights, bringing people back to the Declaration of Independence. This is a passion of yours.
Yeah.
Why is this such a passion? I mean, Tell this group here why this is so important that we cannot miss this. I mean, what's the message you're trying to drive here?
So for me personally, it's important because I think this is what the Bible teaches us, that we are, in fact, as humans, each imbued with this dignity just because we're human beings, no matter what our lot in life is. And to do that, you need a benchmark, a baseline, a foundation. And our founders gave that to us. It's in the Declaration of Independence. It is unambiguous. They talk about these as God-given rights. It's in our Constitution as well. It talks about it. The Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments echo those same central ideas. And for me, since I was a young soldier, and then when I was in law school, I'd looked at this and I'd seen that this project of preserving these core set of rights about protection of human life and making sure that individuals had the ability to exercise their own faith, it had become unmoored around the world. And so I thought when I got this opportunity as Secretary of State, I wanted to see if I couldn't go reground this, to put it back to these founding ideas that we all know and cherish. And it's interesting because I set about doing it with a commission. The commission worked for about 14 months, and I had no idea that when the commission wrapped up its work, America would be where it is today, where you can see on our streets mobs that frankly just have a very fundamental, a very different view about the rule of law, about these rights, and about the American tradition, and who want to tear this country down. So I had no idea that the commission would wrap up its work roughly the same time. If you get a chance to read the report, you'll see they remarked on that, but yesterday I talked about this too. If we, as Americans and believers, walk away from the central understanding of America as founding as being good, and America as being a force for good in the world, then I think America is at real risk, and I know our capacity to do good around the world will be diminished greatly. And so I wanted to put this marker down, not to discover new truths. These truths are with us and are important and have been with us both since biblical times and for America since 1776. And I wanted to go dust them off and remind people all across the world that America indeed has this rights tradition, and it matters, and it is grounded in a faith tradition that we can be proud of. And we ought not to walk around timidly in the world, but shine the light and carry that message as we, as diplomats, go deliver what is an American message all across the world.
Well, thank you for doing that. So for those of us in business, those of us in ministry, many times it's like we need to get back to the core values.
Yeah.
And that's what you're saying.
Conceptually.
These are the boulders that make America exceptional.
That's exactly right.
Thank you for your leadership of that.
Thank you.
Talk to us about your faith. First of all, I think it's just novel that you and Susan would choose, not choose, I don't know how it worked, you forced her, whatever, to teach 5th grade Sunday school class. It's now, but I'm sure that prepared you to be Secretary of State.
Oh, it did, absolutely, yes.
But then
yes.
How does your faith guide you on a day-to-day, and how's your faith sustain you on a day-to-day basis? Other than knowing that we're praying for you.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that, lightly, we're praying for you.
So, Susan alluded to this when she did her introduction today. There's not a thing that I do that is not guided by my understanding of how it is as a Christian I'm supposed to interact. And you should note, there are a couple people here who work with me. I don't live up to it every day. I don't always get it right, but I know when I got it wrong, because I know what it is the Lord demands of me and how we're supposed to build our team to go forth in the world. And so I see it wherever I go. Susan talked about this. It is remarkable. You'll be in countries that are Muslim countries. You'll be in places that have different faiths. And I'll have these leaders, usually one-on-one, tell me how much they appreciate the fact that I am disciplined in my faith, that I'm prepared to talk about that openly, that I don't hide it, that I gave a speech in Cairo where I opened with the remarks that I'm an evangelical Christian. And you should know, I don't think they're here. My speechwriters took that line out 3 times. And I kept putting it back in because it was important. Not because the Abrahamic faith, but I wanted them to know who I was. And it's important when we're engaged in these complex, difficult international problems that they know with whom they're dealing and the value set that individual derives his understanding of the world from. And so it's been a blessing to have that as a backbone of the way I think about the world. I don't hide it when I'm with my team. And so many wonderful things flow from. First of all, I hear from people all the time, tonight too, people that say they're praying for me. Susan and I and Nick value that and appreciate it and can feel it. Second, you'd be surprised at how many times I'll be walking around at one of our embassies, or I'll be even in the building in Washington, and someone will just hand me a little note. And they'll say how much they appreciate the fact that they have a Secretary of State for the first time in a long time who they felt like gave them permission to be clear about who they are as faithful people. And so I'll get these little notes. I climbed off a plane at a hot, dusty place in Africa. It's probably been 2.5 years ago. And the fellow, a security guy, came up and handed me this little book, a tiny little miniature Bible, and just said, "We know, we love you. Christians around the world are watching what America's doing. Please thank the president." It's always encouraging when you see that, because you know not only were you there to talk about the foreign policy issues of the day, but you honored them and their commitment to the Lord. And that always, for me, reminds me how important it is that I talk about this in a way that it's appropriate and clear and directive about who it is I serve first.
Thank you. It's a real, go ahead, yes. I think it's a real compliment to you when people either credit you or critique you for believing what you believe to be really real, because you don't walk away from it. And that's usually when people know, I can now trust you, instead of you're going to be this person going back and forth. Oval Office. Talk about the Oval Office when you got to be Secretary of State and you come into the Oval Office, and each time you go back into the Oval Office, what does the Oval Office do to you when you go in there? And I'm kind of repeating a question, I believe, of you saying to me in your office. So, but I know the Oval Office, you do not take that lightly when you walk in.
No, it's something. I've spent innumerable hours there now over the course of 3.5 years, sometimes just with the president, but often in bigger groups. When you walk through, there's a door that's on one side that leads from the main office. You walk in there, right? You know the history, you know the place, you know the things that have happened there that are really good and have gone well. You know the challenges that have been foisted on America where leaders had really difficult decisions to make. So I know two things. One, it's an enormous privilege to get the opportunity to walk in and brief the world's most powerful leader on your recommendations about how America ought to move forward. And second, you know there's a human being sitting there alongside you and often beside you trying to do the same thing. It means you need to show up with your A game. That you have an obligation not just to wander in loosely and think out loud, but rather to come prepared to present all the data, all the facts, your recommendation, the other options, and to deliver in a concise way. I think about this. I'll walk out and, you know, the Secretary of Agriculture walks in, or the Secretary of Health and Human Services, or Betsy DeVos, right? I've got a full portfolio figuring out foreign policy. The president has multiples and multiples of the workload that I do. And so I always know I have the responsibility to try and get it right, get it concise, and help him make the decision that he's responsible for. He got elected. I didn't get elected. He reminds me that he got multiple millions more votes that night than I did, with some frequency. But it is such a special place. You've seen it on. You've all seen it on TV. Some of you, I'm sure, have had a chance to walk in there. It is, in my judgment, hallowed ground, and I have a responsibility to do my best to make sure I give the president every single thing I have every time I get a chance to go in there. I'll give one little story too. The president feels this as well. He very much loves this White House. He loves to show it off. I don't know how many times he said, "Mike, have you been up to the Lincoln bedroom? Have you seen that?" Right? He loves to share this special piece of history with everyone who comes to see him. But I walked in there, I can't remember, it was Saturday morning early, and I had come by, and President sitting behind his desk, and I came in. We had a very difficult issue that we'd been working on for months. And I started, and he said, "Mike, just take a second. just take a second, look around." And he says, "What are you going to do when you're not doing this anymore?" and again, I remember he's tweeted people out many times. And so I said, "Well, sir, I'm planning to do this a little while longer. Is that a good plan?" He says, "No, I mean, literally, we get this chance to lead and to serve I was a real estate guy, and I'm not sure what the heck are you going to go do? You ran a machine shop. I mean, what are you going to go do? And it reminds me how much he appreciates that we each have this moment, we get this time, and we have a real responsibility to do our level best to get it right in the way that the American people demanded when they voted back in 2016, and that we can get it as right as we can so when they vote here in just another handful of weeks, they get it right one more time.
I want to ask this question in a way that it's a positive light, but there's so much media, back, forth, Trump, 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 Trump. What do you appreciate about President Donald Trump in your position as Secretary of State?
Yeah. You can have serious conversations with him 24/7, any time of the day. Say, Mr. President, here's where I think we have this right. Here's what I think we're getting wrong. And he will take it on board. Not every leader that I've worked with is prepared to do that. It doesn't mean that he's going to conclude the same thing that I concluded. I often don't have the full range of issues. There are other complex trade-offs that he may be thinking about and have to make. But there's never been a time when I said, Mr. President, I need 10 minutes to talk to you about this. If I'm traveling by phone or I want to come by and see you, that he's said, nope, I don't want to hear. I want to know what you're thinking, Mike, and I want to know what your team is presenting as the option set to me. The second thing is, and you don't see this, and you'll never see this in the New York Times, I can assure you, is I've seen the other pieces of President Trump too. I've seen him. When I walk in, I'm a relatively frequent traveler. He's behind his desk. I just come in, he stays there. But I've watched when visitors come in, whether they're little kids or they're people from religious institute, whoever it is, he gets up and he wants to shake their hand. He wants them to know how much he appreciates them being there. And I remember I'd been nominated to be the CI director. And I got a call from a person who I can't imagine would have ever called me, a very famous person with a long and successful career. Every one of you would know his name. And he said, Mike, you're gonna get a real treat. You're gonna get to work with President Trump. It is not always going to be easy. And I said, well, I appreciate that. And he said, but I want you to know that when I lost my wife, it was about 4 years ago at the time, he said, every week, President Trump called me to tell me he was thinking about me for 3.5 years until I remarried. And he said, it got me through that. And he said, nobody else. He says, we were friends, but we weren't that close. But President Trump took the time to just remind himself to take just a minute and help this man who was going through a very difficult time. His wife had passed away. And he said, I'll never forget how tender and how caring this person was. And he had nothing to gain from it. President Trump had no benefit to receive from doing that. He just did it because he knew it was the right thing to do, and he could help someone through a very, very difficult time. I could tell half a dozen stories like that the world isn't going to see, but I've had a chance to see that from President Trump.
Let me end with this. Obviously, you have a very influential position, as you said today. It's something that you need to steward. These people have all positions of influence in their communities and in different states and all that. If you could give them kind of a 2-minute, this is what I would ask you to do. This is what I'd ask you to do for our country at this time, at this moment, because we need you.
Yeah.
What would it be?
Well, we always start with prayer. This is what we believe. But once we've done that, you got just another minute, be fearless. The non-believers are fearless, I assure you. Speak the truth. Speak it everywhere you go. The grocery store, schools, your place of business. I know sometimes it's uncomfortable. It doesn't feel like it's fit for the place you are, but the other team's doing it. And the other team has a very different vision for America than those of us who are believers are, those of us who understand the founding the way that we all do. I must say I didn't always do this in my time before I entered back into government. I would just ask that you all, if it's on your heart and you believe that America is worth all of this work and all of this so that our kids and our grandkids can have the opportunity to live in this exceptional nation, then it is also worth, in a way that is Christian, in a way that is decent, in a way that is respectful, making clear your views and being fearless in articulating them in every setting in which you find yourself. If each of us will do that, if each of us will take on that task, then I'm confident that this nation will continue to be that very, very special place that we all know it is and want it to be for another 240 years.
Sounds great. Sounds like all-in leadership. Ladies and gentlemen, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo.
Thank you. Thank you.